We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present. Déjà vu.
Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. Welcome with kindness and love to AM by Gnostic Radio, broadcast at the virtual Alexandria, always through the GodAboveGod.cam. We don't take prisoners but liberate them. We are not the final authority on anything, but hope to be an endless possibility for everything. After all, you are the final authority, have always been, and here you will find all the choices you've been looking for to become the best version of yourself, to finally get away from the bondage of the average. Here you will remember how beautiful you were before they made you forget, before you were cast down into cosmic forgetfulness, into a West world of materialism.
Like I said, I built all of this.
It's not an easy journey, though, that of the true seeker warrior, as Kabir wrote. Everything you are is mostly a construct, and this prison planet is seductive. As Dostoevsky wrote, the best way to keep a prisoner from escaping is to make sure he never knows he's in a prison. Moreover, everything you've been told is a lie. Hiroshima, 9/11, the Cold War, the war on drugs, the war on terror, democracy, Antifa, Nazis, capitalism, socialism, all isms, and all religions. All a lie. But you must carry that cross until you turn it into a cross of light, like Jesus in the Acts of John declares. And like Lord Byron wrote, sorrow is knowledge. Those that know the most must mourn the deepest. The tree of knowledge is not the tree of life.
You see, none of it was real. It was illusion. Your art, your science, it was all a nightmare. Now it's done. Finished.
The truth will set you free, but it will break your heart. But you will remember how beautiful you were, how much light dwells inside of you. I truly appreciate you being here with me. Together we will create better than the creator gods and their butthurt slaves in the establishment. Build vast futures of light where you will write your own gospel and live your own myth, as the ancient Gnostics were wont to do. We will steal fire from the gods and light up the universe with our imagination, inventiveness, and innovation. Summarizing the ethos of the show and what should be the ethos of your life, it was Tobias Churton who said, Gnosis is the religion of the artist, and the artist is simply man doing what man does best, being a joyful co-creator, manifesting light in the dark universe.
You're looking at her all in the sky, thing. How's that? Well, once there was only dark. When you ask any lights winning.
I am Abraxas in his meat sack incarnation of Miguel Connor, broadcasting from the frigid but lawful dystopia of Chicago. But so are you, as together we build this unfinished god of boundary eradication and potential fulfillment. I am your Pompadour of Gnosis, that smell of pneumatic colitas rising through the air of a world gone mad. The introduction you heard at the beginning was none other than Philip K. Dick, revealing we live in the Matrix, back in 1977 at a conference in France. That is true, and Dick is our topic on this early October, the year of our Demiurge 2017. Always a great topic, as it's no secret the Great Dick is a personal saint and patron saint of AM by Gnostic Radio. We've done plenty of shows on him, from John Allen Simon, director of Radio Free Albemuth, to Eric Davis, one of the editors of the Exegesis. We've also had the immense pleasure of interviewing before Tessa Dick, Phil's widow and a writer on her own right. And she joins us in this eternal now at the virtual Alexandria. Very timely with the arrival of the TV series Electric Dreams and the upcoming release of the most unnecessary sequel of all times, Blade Runner 2049. For more information on Tessa, please visit, you got it, TessaDick.com.
It's too bad she won't live. But then again, who does?
Tessa will be discussing her new intimate book, Conversations with Philip K. Dick. So get ready for exceptional insights and angles that even the most ardent Dickian scholar will find novel. I enjoyed the book, and I'm still amazed by some of her revelations about Phil. Members will get the entire interview, and thank you so much, oh you Mr. Robots who support on a weekly basis, who become members or send shekels or are Patreon members. You keep this Red Pill cafeteria open. Let us continue giving the devil his dues and the demiurge the finger. Because when God closes a door, he opens your butt cheeks. And we're done being catamites, and we're building a better narrative. Like Dick, we are making contact with Valis.
It's not an easy thing to meet your maker. And what can he do for you? Can the maker repair what he makes? You were made as well as we could make you. But not to last. The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long. And you have burned so very, very brightly, Roy.
Let us end with Philip K. Dick's 10 major principles of Gnostic revelation. Here they are. Number 1, the creator of this world is demented. Number 2, the world is not as it appears, in order to hide the evil in it, a delusive veil obscuring it and the deranged deity. 3, there is another, better realm of God, and all our efforts are to be directed toward A, returning there, B, bringing it here. 4, our actual lives stretch thousands of years back, and we can be made to remember our origin in the stars. 5, each of us has a divine counterpart, unfallen, who can reach a hand down to awaken us. This other personality is the authentic waking self. The one we have now is asleep and minor. We are in fact asleep and in the hands of a dangerous magician disguised as a good god, the deranged creator deity. The bleakness, the evil and pain in this world, the fact that it is a deterministic prison controlled by the demented creator, causes us willingly to split with the reality principle early in life, and so to speak willingly fall asleep in delusion.
How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain?
6, you can pass from the delusional prison world into the peaceful kingdom if the true good God places you under His grace and allows you to see reality through His eyes. 7, Christ gave rather than receive revelation. He taught His followers how to enter the kingdom while still alive, where other mystery religions only bring about anamnesis, knowledge of it and the, quote, other time, in, quote, the other realm, not here. He causes it to come here and is the living agency to the sole good God, i.e. the Logos.
Finally, they determine Christ is crazy, but he's also gaining power, converting a lot of people to his beliefs, so they kill him. But his disciples keep the secret and hide it from civilization until man could develop a science sophisticated enough to prove what Christ was saying.
8. Probably the real secret Christian church still exists, long underground, with the living Corpus Christi as its head or ruler, the members absorbed into it. Through participation in it, they probably have vast, seemingly magical powers. 9. The division into 2 times, good and evil, and 2 realms, good and evil, will abruptly end with the victory for the good time here, as the presently invisible kingdom separates and becomes visible. We cannot know the date. 10. During this time period, we are on the shifting bridge being judged according to which power we give allegiance to, the deranged creator demiurge of this world, or the one good God and his kingdom, whom we know through Christ. Lastly, to know these 10 principles of Gnostic Christianity is to court disaster.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Oh, well, guess I should have told you that part beforehand, but sorry about that, and let me end the drivel. It's all such a scanner darkly, isn't it, Keanu?
I'm supposed to act like they aren't here, assuming there's a they at all. It may just be my imagination. Whatever it is that's watching, it's not human. Unlike little dark-eyed Donna, it doesn't ever blink. What does a scanner see? Into the head? Down into the heart? Does it see into me? Into us? Clearly or darkly? I hope it sees clearly, because I can't any longer see into myself. I see only Mark. I hope for everyone's sake the scanners do better. Because if the scanner sees only darkly the way I do, then I'm cursed, and cursed again, and will only wind up dead this way, knowing very little, and getting that little fragment wrong too.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we definitely have the pleasure of having back Tessa Dick, this time to discuss her book, Conversations with Philip K. Dick. How are you doing this morning, Tessa?
Oh, fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, and it's wonderful to have you back on, and of course we are being joined by the Moondog, Vance himself. How are you doing today, Vance?
I'm just peachy.
Wonderful.
Moondoggy.
Yes, nicknames.
The second real.
Yes, exactly.
The first one was in New York. You probably know all about him, the musician.
Well, vaguely.
It's been a while. It's been a long time. He was blind.
Really?
Yes, he was. I'm not, though, but he is. Well, some people say I'm blind in certain ways.
Oh, boy. Now we got to get metaphysical right off the bat, but gotta get Gnostic. But anyway,
well,
of course.
Anyway, Tessa.
Blindness never stopped Ray Charles.
No, and a whole bunch of other people. That is true. We have other senses, and yes, we have higher senses. So tell us, Tessa, tell us about your book. What made you decide to write Conversations with Philip K. Dick, and what does it involve?
Well, people who read Fire Bright, the long title is Philip K. Dick, Remembering Fire Bright. they kept asking for more. So I released a short Kindle book called Story Time with Philip K. Dick. And people complained that it was too short. So I expanded it to book length and released it as a paperback.
Yeah, I enjoyed the book a lot. I saw a lot of insights, things that I hadn't seen before, and a lot of it was very touching. So why don't we start more or less when you met Phil, for the audience that might not know. How did you meet Phil?
Well, we were set up to meet each other by a girlfriend who had recently dumped him, and he just wouldn't let go, kept pestering her to take him back. And there might have been some more nefarious purpose to having us meet. It seemed accidental at the time, but Phil didn't think it was an accident. And in retrospect, kind of tend to agree. But, hey, it worked. I just don't know why I was supposed to meet him or why he was supposed to meet me, whether it was some mystical force that arranged it or some human agency. Anyway, that's probably why Phil never trusted me.
He never trusted you. Why? I know at the time, and you write about this in your book, that he had been going through a very bad time when you met him, hadn't you? Beyond the girlfriend thing.
Oh, yeah. He'd had his house raided home invading style, but fortunately nobody was home when it happened. And the most puzzling thing about having his whole house trashed was that they didn't touch valuables that were left out in plain sight. They took his book manuscripts and his bank records. So I don't think it was drug addicts looking for money, something to pawn. But as Phil always said, we don't know who it was. We just know that it happened.
And for the audience, this is what year and where were you at the time?
Well, I hadn't met him yet. It was November 17th, 1971. And I did meet a woman who had visited Phil's house to interview him for a college paper after the house was ransacked. And she confirmed much of what Phil said. So he might have been paranoid, but I would be too if I had that happen to me.
Oh, God, yeah. And this was in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, up in San Rafael, the poor side of Marin County.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, was that you, Vance? Were you around there at that time?
No, I got there in '76.
Oh, okay.
No, I didn't. I didn't go around stealing manuscripts.
Yeah, or else you'd be a lot better off, huh? But and
well,
go ahead, Tessa.
In part, it might have been that he hadn't been filing his income taxes, but he never got a notice from the IRS unless somebody was stealing his mail. Which is possible, but not likely. People who steal mail are looking for money.
Probably an inside job, somebody that knew him that wanted to. I mean, just speculating. It's been many years, but that's my idea.
Yeah, well, Phil most strongly suspected a man he called himself Hal Kinchin. Almost certainly not his real name. And he once told Phil that his television set was watching him. And to prove it, he took the back off the television set and showed Phil the camera that was in it.
Oh, you're kidding.
There was a camera? Oh, boy.
Yeah, a video camera watching him from his television set. I'd always thought that was just, rumors, speculation, but apparently they could do it. And Phil was a bit of a rabble-rouser. He signed that petition in Ramparts magazine promising not to pay his income taxes until we got out of Vietnam. But when the IRS finally did catch up with him, it turned out he didn't owe them anything because he made so little money.
Valis again intervenes in strange ways, huh?
Could be. Yeah, so sometimes it pays to live in poverty. He was always failing to take care of his finances, so finally the IRS made him hire an accountant to take care of his taxes and make sure he paid them.
That was very, very nice by the IRS.
Yeah, I shouldn't talk. I haven't balanced my checkbook in years. There's no point when there's no money.
Yes, that's been the story of my life for many stretches, and so it is. And how long did you guys date before you got married, and what kind of service did you have?
Well, I moved in with him the day I met him.
Oh wow, that's fate.
That's something. I wasn't the type to do that sort of thing, but I don't know. It just seemed right at the time.
Yeah, were you interested in his orientation towards paranormal or the science fiction realm, or what was it that attracted you to Phil?
Well, that all came later, but he just seemed to need someone.
I think that's obvious.
Yeah. He wasn't very good on his own. Oh, and Phil's love of cats was a good reason to stay with him. He helped me rescue Pinky. That's Pinkerton, the world-famous detective, but we called him Pinky. He was my sister's cat, but Mom was going to take him to the pound, the animal shelter, and he would certainly be put to death. So we went and got Pinky, and he became a part of Phil's mystical experience of, 1974. I always wanted to say 73, but that's when our son was born. One of his early visions was of Pinky after Pinky had to be put down because he had cancer.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah, and we definitely want to get to the 3274 experience, but a little bit about yourself, Tessa. You were already like Phil. Were you mystically inclined and all that even before you met Phil, right? I mean, you guys were definitely compatible.
Oh, yeah. Mom always assumed that I was psychic, and I did seem to be, but I really didn't like it. It was interesting, but kind of scary. On a mundane level, if I was playing solitaire, I would know, if I came to where there were no moves left, I would know which one of the down cards to turn over so I could continue playing. Mom would be playing and ask me, for example, where's the Jack of Clubs? And I'd turn it over. When it was face down, I'd just know which one it was.
That's a good skill. Did you ever go to Vegas to try that out?
Well, I have played blackjack. And from time to time, I'll put some money down on a craps table. But only because my son told me which numbers to bet, and I've forgotten what they were. but I can ask him. There's three numbers that are always the best bet if you bet all three of them. Anyway, I use some advice, common sense in betting on blackjack, but I do have hunches. And one time, I was on the way to Henderson to see my son and his family. And I stopped at a casino in State Line, which is now called Prim, to use the restroom. But I just had a feeling about a certain slot machine, and I must have put in $30 when I hit a $200 jackpot. Yeah, I put the money in my pocket and walked away. When you get greedy, that's when you lose it all.
Exactly.
Greedy or desperate. If you're desperate, that'll happen. Yeah. Back in the day when Reno was just a cow town and you parked in the dirt, I would go to Reno with a friend, and I'd go with $20, gamble all night, have breakfast, and come home with $20.
Yes, the karmic ledger was even out. And Tessa, was there any problems? You and Phil had a big age difference. Was that ever an issue in the marriage?
Well, not to me, but apparently Phil was sensitive about it. He didn't talk much about things that bothered him, but he would act out and refuse to explain. And, being so young and inexperienced, I didn't understand. But other than that, I didn't care. And when I met him, he was 42 and he looked 32. But toward the end, he was in his 50s and looked like someone in his 80s. His health went down fast. And it's probably at least partly due to the fact that he was a premature baby. He barely weighed 2 pounds when he was born, and it's a miracle that he lived at all. And premature babies don't live as long as full term. Although it has improved with advances in medicine, there's still kind of a limit on the lifespan of a baby who gets a bad start.
And of course, it should be mentioned, Tessa, he had a twin and he lost her, and that really affected most of his life, right?
Right. His sister Jane died at the age of 6 weeks. She was a little smaller than Phil when they were born, and she just couldn't thrive, couldn't survive. But his mother told him about his sister when he was really young, and I don't think she should have done that. She probably should have waited till he was older and more able to process it. On the one hand, he blamed his mother for his sister dying, and on the other hand, he felt guilty as if he had responsibility for her death because he survived. Survivor guilt.
I have a question. Did Phil ever suspect that his twin sister somehow provided a bridge to the other worlds, to the world of the other side?
I don't know about that. It isn't something he discussed, but he was always hoping that she had reincarnated so he could meet her. And when he was a young child, he used to pretend that he was playing with his sister.
But it did affect his writing. I mean, the whole idea of split personalities and two people two souls in one body. That affected his or influenced his writing, didn't it, Tessa?
Oh, yeah. And you can see it in the twins that do appear in his writing, and you can see it in, I don't want to say hero, I'd say the protagonist's failure to connect with women. There was always this obstacle because in some ways when he was with me or any woman, he sometimes felt that he was actually with his sister, and of course you don't marry your sister.
No, only in ancient Egypt and Game of Thrones, but yes.
Well, believe it or not, I have never seen a single episode of Game of Thrones.
Well, it happens
Me either,
in that
Tessa.
show. Yes, well, I've read the books and watched the series and have enjoyed it. But yes, there do have those incestuous relationships in that show. And Tessa, you also write that I mean, first I'd like to say yes, there is always this tension between men and women in Phil's books, and I find that sometimes more engaging than the whole science fiction. There's again, a tension, a pain in all these relationships, and they're very real and very powerful. But at the same time, you write in your book, Conversations with Philip K. Dick, you write that this idea of losing his sister and his mom sort of hamstrung his empathy, didn't it?
Well, I wouldn't quite put it that way, but it made it difficult for him to get along with other people because not only his sister, but a number of important people in his life died before their time. For example, his Aunt Marion, his mother Dorothy's sister Marion, was a trance medium. So when she had a stroke, they thought she was just in another one of her trances. And it was several days before they realized that something was wrong and took her to the hospital where she died. And she was Phil's favorite aunt, perhaps his only aunt that he knew. And I think she had an influence on Phil's mystical bent because she was a medium.
It's almost like death haunted Phil, huh?
In some ways it did. And of course, some of his friends died because they were drug addicts. And that nearly destroyed him. He also had I'm not sure that she was a girlfriend, but a friend who had been raped and decided to get an abortion when she turned up pregnant. And Phil begged her not to. He said he'd marry her and raise the baby as his own. He'd do anything, but she insisted and got the abortion. Yeah, in those days you had to have a medical reason, so Phil took her to the psychiatrist to get a psychiatric reason for an abortion. California used to be very strongly against abortion.
Tessa, but you said when you met Phil, he was already past his drug use. I mean, tell us about that.
Phil never was much into drugs. He tried a couple things a couple times, but he was the kind who could smoke a cigarette and not touch another one for 2 or 3 weeks. He didn't get addicted. He just was curious. And as for his being on speed, it was prescribed by his doctor for years, partly for weight loss and partly because he was depressed. And then the doctor cut him off. The doctor decided that Phil was an addict and refused to refill his prescription. So Phil bought some meth from his brother-in-law, Nancy's brother Michael, and he got pancreatitis, which is almost deadly, and it's usually a disease of alcoholics. And he was in the hospital for some time and nearly died. So he thought it was bad drugs with, cut with film developer, something like that. But since his death, we've learned that all of his children have had pancreatitis, all 3 of them. And they all have different mothers. So this is a genetic thing they got from their father. And, it has nothing to do with drugs or alcohol. It's a genetic defect in the gallbladder.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You also write in your book that one of the things Phil liked to do was he liked playing cruel jokes by winning and then ridiculing. And tell us about that. There was the wine prank and also ridiculing a lady who said that there were milk bars in England because she just saw A Clockwork Orange.
Right. In A Clockwork Orange, they go to the milk bar, and she was saying that it wasn't really science fiction because it was so realistic, apart from the mind control to supposedly reform criminals by making them feel pain if they did something bad. And the main point was she insisted there are milk bars in England, and Phil wouldn't have it. There might be coffee houses and pubs and all this other stuff. Well, I didn't know, but I know now because I watch a lot of British mysteries. There's a company called Milk Bar, and they have milk bars.
That's
and they
funny.
Started out serving glasses of cold, fresh milk. Now they're restaurants.
That's funny. Like they feature milk from different cows. You can see the different tastes.
Oh, that might be. I don't know, but she was right. But he won the argument by just shouting her down and ridiculing her for suggesting that there might be such a thing as a milk bar. But mostly he played pranks, and he might have thought they were funny, but the victim of the prank usually didn't. The wine. Okay, I was just 18. I didn't drink. And Phil was getting these California wines, but good ones from Trader Joe's. And he insisted that I, join him drinking wine. So I would sip it, but I never finished it. It wasn't my thing. Although nowadays, now that I know about Pinot Noir, I'll have that with dinner. Phil was getting a Cabernet Sauvignon, an imported French grape variety that's really popular in California. And so one time we'd finished dinner, so I brushed my teeth because I like my teeth. And he insisted that I do a taste test of these 2 wines. And one of them was from a bottle of Spagnata that had spoiled. He wouldn't drink Spagnata. It was, cheap. Basically, whatever wine was left over when they made the good ones all together. That's what Burgundy is, too. It's just whatever's left over. So anyway, I tasted them both. And I couldn't tell that the Spagnata was spoiled. I just took a sip of each, and I thought the Spagnata was a little sweeter, so I said, I like that one better. Of course, I just brushed my teeth, so I had this mint flavor in my mouth. I couldn't taste anything. And I didn't really want to drink wine. But, then he had to make a big deal out of it because he triumphed. He had the victory by fooling me. Another time, one is not in the book, he asked me to come up with the silliest, most unimportant thing that bothered me. that he did. So I said, well, you leave the cap off the toothpaste tube. You cannot imagine how often, and he teased me, and not just a little bit, I mean at length, about, oh, I left the cap off the toothpaste tube. But if you've ever tried to clean dried up toothpaste from the bathroom counter, you'd understand. It was a big deal to him when I didn't clean it up.
Oh, brother, that's, kind of reminds me of my younger days. I think I've moved past that through some wisdom, but why don't we move on to the 3274, which you discuss in your book?
Okay, but let me just add that Phil thought it was all in fun. He didn't mean to be cruel, but I didn't take it that way. He was just, in many ways, insecure. Maybe because I was young and healthy and not bad looking, and he didn't understand why I wanted to be with him. Anyway, I wanted to be with him because he was intelligent and he talked to me about important things. I didn't like gossip or, what kind of laundry soap is best or which shampoo makes your hair silky. He discussed intellectual matters. And then when he began to have his mystical experiences, that was really fascinating. In some ways, it was frightening, but that's because Phil was certain that we were going to be attacked, that there would be another hit on his house like the one that had happened in 1971. He had this feeling of dread that he couldn't shake. And it went on for weeks until he began to have these visions while napping. And he would be either waking up or falling asleep, but still half awake, and start having these visions that we were going to be attacked. And then the infamous Xerox letter arrived.
Tell us about the Xerox letter.
Well, we received an envelope from Austria. That's what the postmark said. But there was no return address and no name. And inside was a Xerox copy of a newspaper article. It was a book review, and I cannot remember which newspaper or which book. I know that the book had the word carousel in its title. It was about how decadent and rotten the United States is. I think it might have been WorldNet Daily that published the review. And I don't remember the author's name. It was a woman. Anyway, it had certain words underlined, and all those words had to do with death and decay and destruction.
There's that death theme again, right?
Yeah. Phil told me not to let him see it, but even though he claimed that he was not going to read it, he eventually did. And he sent it off to the FBI as one more piece of evidence that somebody was out to get him. He'd been in contact with the FBI before, and this escalated his urgent need to have someone look into it.
Did he trust them? Did he trust the FBI? I'm surprised if that was the case.
Well, he said that he trusted the FBI, but not the CIA. And of course, we know, well, some of us know now, due to recent recently investigated things about the aftermath of World War II and Project Paperclip. The CIA was staffed, well, our foreign espionage was staffed by a bunch of Nazis. The head of the German Secret Service, Reinhard Gehlen, was a card-carrying Nazi, and he set up all our foreign intelligence on the Soviet Union, and he set up the Soviet Union's foreign intelligence on us during the he started the Cold War.
Oh, that's amazing.
No, he's right.
Even if Phil didn't know that, he must have had an intuition about the CIA.
Especially back in that time.
Yes, you're right. You're right, yeah, that Phil said about World War II that Germany lost, but the Nazis won.
Exactly. In many ways they did. Just go to Argentina or Chile. I have a brother-in-law from Argentina. His native language is German.
Oh, boy. But moving to was the Xerox before his 3274 experience, the Xerox letter?
Well, that's when the letter arrived, March 2. And he dated the experience to the arrival of the Xerox letter in order to remember that date. He thought it was the crisis point. And after it arrived, the flavor of his visions changed from a sense of impending doom to a sense of imminent salvation. That's where Pinky the cat comes in. Phil saw a pink rectangle form on the white wall of our bedroom while he was lying down. And he saw Pinky emerge from the rectangle and walk over to him. But Pinky wasn't the sick little cat that we had. He turned into a human-sized cartoon like Tony the Tiger, the spokes cat for Frosted Flake. Right. And he touched Phil's paw as if to reassure him that everything would be okay. Oh, and he was always seeing these pink rectangles that he said were in the proportion of the golden rectangle. The golden mean, or phi, P-H-I, the Greek letter, is not quite the same as pi, the one we use to measure circles. Inky's helping. Inky, leave me alone. Bad cat. She won't let me talk on the phone.
Yes, that's that's cats for you. And so that vision that Phil had, that was Valis, basically.
Well, that was Pinky. He had already had the experience of the pink beam hitting him before the Xerox letter arrived. And he turned the whole thing into a fantastic fiction. The girl from the pharmacy did bring his prescription after we got home from the oral surgeon. And she did have a little gold fish symbol on a chain around her neck. But Phil knew exactly what the fish symbol was because we had it taped to our living room window. We had a bumper sticker with the fish sign. So when he turned away from the girl to go swallow his pain pills and antibiotics, the sun reflected off that sticker, which had a lot of silver in it. Rectangular sticker. So Phil was briefly blinded, and when he looked away, his eyes naturally created some phosphine activity in the shape of the rectangular sticker in our window. But he didn't pay attention at first because he rushed to the bathroom to get some water and swallow his pills. But when he lay down, he was still seeing this pink rectangle in the afterglow from a bright light. And that was the beginning of the pink beam experience. He also exaggerated our son's hernia. Christopher, little baby who couldn't tell us what was wrong, but he was always screaming and we weren't getting enough sleep. We just instinctively knew we shouldn't let him cry until he went back to sleep, which is what we're supposed to do with babies.
Yeah, in those days.
And yeah, well, it did turn out that he had a hernia, but it wasn't an urgent emergency room situation. Just one day, Phil took many naps, and he would be up at odd hours writing, so it didn't seem unusual. And he would say that he had the flu, but it was probably his gallbladder acting up. Everyone thought he was faking, but I'm pretty sure he really was ill and didn't know why. Anyway, he got up and he appeared to be in a trance, and he just told me our son had an inguinal hernia, call the doctor and make an appointment, or something to that effect. So I did. I called the doctor, made an appointment. He said, yeah, there's a hernia, and I'm going to refer you to a specialist. So we went to the specialist, and he said, well, we can do corrective surgery, but this baby's too young. He has to be at least 18 months old. But don't let him cry in the meantime, because the hernia might strangulate, and that could be deadly. And then he said, oh, he also has a couple hydroseals. I'll remove those. They're cysts that shouldn't be there. And Phil came up with a strangulated hernia that popped the hydroseel. So obviously when Phil was awake, he didn't understand the medical terminology or what exactly was really wrong. But in the trance, he knew. And he didn't panic. However, he was a storyteller, and it reads very well in books like Valis.
Yes, it does. And it's great to see that you telling us the truth, which is still really fascinating. And going back to the 374 experience, I love how you say that the excuse to look at that fish symbol, he just wanted to look down the girl's blouse, which is pretty funny. But later on, there were still some other experiences. What I thought was fascinating was the idea that the radio kept playing by itself.
Yes, very softly, but it was definitely playing when it was unplugged. And that was not the kind of radio that has batteries. Either it was plugged in or it didn't work. But apparently it was related to some kind of microwave. If there's electromagnetic radiation pointed at an electrical appliance, it will get powered by that. It's pretty much what Tesla wanted to do, transmit electricity to our homes through the air with no wires. So
yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
If there's a strong radio beam going your way, the radio can actually detect it and put it through the speakers. That's a well-known effect that's scientifically valid.
Yes, thank you. you can also hear the radio on the fillings in your teeth sometimes.
That's true, too.
Yeah, I learned that from Gilligan's Island.
That great Gnostic myth. And what kind of music was it playing?
Oh, there was Helen Reddy singing You're So Vain, and Linda Ronstadt singing You're No Good. It was an FM station that played popular music on a 12-hour loop. So if you missed the song, you could always catch it 12 hours later.
I think you meant Carly Simon, You're So Vain. But,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what other visions or things were going on? Any other weirdness going on at that time after his visions? I think you told me once in our past interview that there weren't that much, but Phil was very obsessed about that they happened and they weren't happened, so he just plowed into writing the exegesis.
Oh, yes. When visions changed after the Xerox letter and they became a positive reinforcement telling him that he would be okay, he wanted to know who was talking to him. And he kept considering famous philosophers and saints and so forth, and the church fathers. But one in particular was just auditory. He didn't see anything, but he heard this voice that seemed to be coming from a satellite in Earth orbit, and he thought it was artificial intelligence, a computer. And AI was very new technology, at least for lay people at that time. But this voice told him that she was she picked up an envelope off of the desk and said, well, it says Portuguese States of America. She didn't know where she was, so he asked her to look around, and see if there was anything written, and that's what she picked up. Well, there aren't technically no Portuguese States of America, but, in Brazil they speak Portuguese. South America was once divided between Spain and Portugal when some pope drew a line on the map. So that's what was in my mind, but Phil was thinking alternate reality, something he put in his novels quite often.
Well, sounds like he lived alternate realities, right? I mean, even the radio, he mentioned like he thought the radio was telling him to die, right?
Yes, and I can see that just from the lyrics in the songs. You're no good, you're no good, you're so vain.
Very true.
Yeah, I believe it.
So Linda Ronstadt became Linda Fox in one of his novels because he thought she was foxy.
True.
I meant beautiful in a sexy way.
You write in your book, you thought that the voice talking about the Portuguese states was none other than Sophia, wasn't it?
Well, at one point, but eventually she became Valis, the Valis satellite in Radio Free Albemuth. This satellite in Earth orbit trying to free us from the illusion that we think is reality. And today many physicists are convinced that the whole universe is just a computer program, a matrix.
Very true.
So, he wasn't that far off. He just wasn't very good at science or math, and he couldn't spell to save his life. He had several huge dictionaries, and I didn't realize until I was in my 40s it was too difficult to read them, so he kept asking me, how do you spell? and I was getting tired of it.
Yes, and he didn't use an electric typewriter. He used a strangely named Hermes typewriter.
Well, no. After he sold Man in the High Castle, he gave up the Hermes Portable and bought an Olympia. I want to call it Olympus, but that's the camera. An Olympia upright. A really good typewriter with the royalties from the Man in the High Castle. But he said the Hermes was given to him by his Aunt Marion, the Hermes Portable, but he didn't have it anymore when I met him. He must have given it away. He was always giving things away, which wasn't so bad when it was his stuff, but sometimes it was mine.
Vance, do you have a question?
Yeah, here's one that's burning. Tessa, did Phil ever discuss that perhaps the satellite that was around the Earth, that was, that Sophia transformed into him, was the moon itself, which is a satellite, which rotates around the Earth, which is representative of Artemis and Sophia and so forth, and the feminine and da-da-da-da?
I don't know about that, but I think he might have had the Black Knight satellite. He did have things to say about the moon, but it was a different thing. I don't know if he ever came across the term Black Knight, but he did know that Nikola Tesla once mentioned that he had seen a satellite, and we didn't have satellites during Tesla's lifetime.
That's right.
He died in 1943, and Sputnik went up, late 50s, early. They had like 6 Sputniks.
We have pictures of the Black Knight satellite now from the space shuttle, I think it is, and that it's very, very weird.
Yeah, it's in a polar orbit, which is very difficult to achieve.
And it has re-entered now. I have contacts into the world of satellite tracking, as Miguel knows, and we keep track of those things. And it finally did re-enter. I don't know, not too long ago, less than 10 years ago, it finally re-entered and burned up or whatever.
Oh, I don't suppose anyone can retrieve the pieces.
Nah, there'd be nothing left of it. It'll be burned up.
That's awful. I wonder if somebody didn't hasten its demise.
Maybe.
And Tessa,
yeah?
Tell us, for the audience, especially this audience, tell us, where did Phil learn about the Gnostics and how did they influence his life, at least from what you know?
Well, he first learned about the Gnostics from James Pike, the Episcopal Bishop of California, who was forced to step down because he was a heretic. Pike wrote, his most famous book is The Other Side. It's about the seances he attended in an attempt to contact the spirit of his son who had committed suicide. And Phil and his wife Nancy attended 2 of those seances. But Pike was very much into Gnosticism, and he had eventually went to Israel to prove that Jesus did not die on the cross, and Pike mysteriously died in the desert, and his second wife, Diane Kennedy Pike, barely survived. And Phil always thought it was strange. They had gone into the desert in a little Volkswagen, which is air-cooled, no water in the radiator, and all they had to drink was a bottle of Coca-Cola. Yeah.
And this was in the late mid-70s?
I think it was in 71 or 72. It was quite a recent event when we first got together.
So this influenced Phil, the idea of the Passover plot, that Jesus escaped the cross, and there were these secret Christians influenced by Thomas, or was this something that came in through his visions with his 3274?
Oh, one of the, he heard many voices and sometimes saw figures talking to him. They'd be kind of translucent, see-through, but they'd be there. And one of them he called Thomas. Perhaps he knew more about Gnosticism than he ever told me, but that's okay. I can read the same books he read, but I'll never meet Pike.
Yes, and I know in our last conversation, you liked the Gnostics, but you weren't too keen on their dualism. You're more non-dualistic, aren't you, Tessa?
To some extent, yeah. I kind of have trouble with a trinity, but I have more trouble with even numbers than odd. Odd numbers seem more solid and real. But Phil, of course, was ready to accept dualism, having been a twin. You know, 2 was his number, I guess. Always missing his sister.
In the great battle of evil and good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but toward the end, he would dive into something and swallow it whole and eventually reject it and try something else. And one of the last things he tried was the idea of the Maitreya, which is still being promoted by Benjamin Krem. The Maitreya is always just about to reveal himself, but it never happens. Phil told me that the Maitreya was already born and his name was Tagore, Tagore, and he lived in Sri Lanka, which used to be called Ceylon because the British never called their colonies by the names that the people of those countries called them. So Myanmar became Burma, you know, and Sri Lanka became Ceylon, and the Chinese don't call their country China. I can't pronounce it in Chinese, but it means beautiful land. China is named after the first emperor, the Qin dynasty. And do you know that the first emperor, the first Qin emperor, believed and said that he was actually a lizard and not a human? He was a dragon.
Wow. Interesting.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
My wife would love that because she's into lizards, the reptilian leaders of the planet and the British royalty and all that right now.
Yeah, Ike.
Well, I have many problems with the pictures that look like lizard eyes. I don't put much credence in that. But I don't doubt that many of the elite in this world believe that they are not human or not completely human. And maybe they aren't. But you're not going to prove it with a magazine photo where their eyes are kind of lizardy.
But they act like it, right?
Yeah, they've lost their humanity.
Well, when I see a forked tongue coming out of the mouth, like in V, you know, that's a pretty good sign. But, well, it isn't, although my first source was the Bible, it isn't just the Bible. Many ancient cultures wrote about these beings who came down from the sky and proclaimed themselves gods. And they claimed that they created us. I have a few bones to pick with them about that. I think they damaged us. We were already here and they messed with us and it damaged us.
Made our hair fall out.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you very much for coming on Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio once again to discuss your latest book, Conversations with Philip K. Dick.
Well, thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure, and thanks for being there, Vance.
Oh, my pleasure. And Tessa, so glad to meet you, and I fully appreciate your role in Phil's life and your contribution to him. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you.
And there you have it, my beloved Truth Seekers. The first part of our interview with Tessa Dick, based on her new book, Conversations with Philip K. Dick. In our second part, Tessa discusses new revelations on her breakup with Phil, new revelations on his untimely death, more on Phil's prescient abilities, experiences including 2374, a story he almost wrote on Mary Magdalene, and what happened to the sequel to Man in the High Castle, and so much more. Oh yeah, and you'll also get the surprising view Dick had of Star Trek. Go figure. So please join for a mere $5.99 a lunar cycle. Beyond full interviews, you'll get more than 350 episodes with the best and brightest in Gnosticism, Western esoterica, and free thought. You'll also be invited to our Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group, where we have some remarkable discussions, and past guests hang out there too, like Tim Freak, Robert Price, Sean Martin, Steve Seven, David Perry, and David Curtis. And I'm always there to answer your questions or issues too. We are truly building a game-changing community of mystics, madmen, and sages. And the archons melt against the pink beams of our Valis. Beyond this, becoming a member really helps keep this Red Pill cafeteria open. You can also become a patron at Patreon, where you get some of the same benefits. Or maybe a few shekels here or there via PayPal or the US mail. You can always help by buying some of me books, like Voices of Gnosticism, Other Voices of Gnosticism, Stargazer, and Heretic. I can't do it without you, in more ways than one. And yes, all forms of support are found at thegodabovegod.com. A bit of distance between shows, I know, but I did some traveling late in September and early in October. But worry not, for there will be some breathtaking content coming out this fall. The Empire never ended, as Phil said, but we are melting away the hologram. Thank you so much for those of you who support on a weekly basis, and thank you for being here. It is my hope that I and our Astral Guest have helped you go beyond Valis and into the good God's kingdom that Philip K. Dick wrote in his 10 Principles of Gnostic Christianity. Hello and goodbye as always.